that's when the light bulb went off, that we are operating in a preventative space, in a risk mitigative space, rather than waiting for these young people to hit the crisis, to get so far into the rabbit hole that it's okay, you need to get sober at 19, you need to go to treatment, you need to enter into what sometimes can be the revolving door of behavioral health care centers. And though these centers are very much needed and serve a great purpose, but sometimes if we can get to them before that need, that should be the goal.
Welcome to another edition of Finding New Waters. I am very honored to have two guests today from YPM, otherwise known as Youth Prevention Mentors. We have the founder and Max Ezrin, who lives in New York but is in Miami today, and then Jack Vaughn, who is in Santa Monica. All right, and my name is
Great.
B. Reeves.
Thank you, B.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for having us.
It's my pleasure and our pleasure. We're very honored to have y'all today. So what I like to do is just let y'all, starting with Max, just tell us exactly what y'all do, just so the people who listen and see this, if anything, they're going to know exactly what you do.
Great. So first, as I just said, thanks for having us. We're thrilled to be on here, and it was just so fortuitous how you and Jack were at dinner, and things just fell into place as they often do in life. I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. In talking about YPM, I think to go back to what we do, we need to rewind to how the company started. And that usually begins with my own journey, as I went through my own struggles with mental health, substance use, all of those behaviors from a young age, probably from 14 to 22. And I was skipping through all the chaos and the madness. I was able to get sober at 22. And I found myself in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was, my great savior, and had no desire or idea of what this recovery world was, and really didn't have any plans to be a part of it outside of my work in AA. And by happenstance, one of the more traumatic moments of my early 20s and early sobriety, I was fired from this job in real estate and hotels that I loved so much, and found myself unemployed and not really sure what to do next, and was connected to an individual in the coaching world. And I had maybe a year and a half sober, kind of knew what coaching was, sober coaching, etc., and got connected with this individual and started my journey as a sober coach. And what I thought it would be was kind of the prototypical sober coaching experience, working with another man, helping them get sober, helping them in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, or helping them on their journey towards abstinence. And that was great, and I had a few of those cases, but really what happened, and again, it was just like by chance that I fell into this, is we started working with, and I guess I'll preface this because it ties into the stories. I grew up in New York City, and that is where my work career in this coaching world took off. And by happenstance, I started working with a couple 15, 16, 17-year-olds who didn't need to get sober, but they were brought to our attention because there was some substance use in their story, but it was really more behavioral. It was really more social. There were some patterns of behaviors that were really concerning, but it was clear that they did need a higher level of care. They didn't need to be sent away, but they needed a change. They needed a shift. And mom and dad weren't providing that education, and neither was their school. And so given that I had grown up in New York City, I had a similar upbringing to a lot of these kids, went to similar schools, I was able to really connect with them again, as I was also only 6, 7 years their senior, so I wasn't that authority figure. I was really more peer who had been through similar, oftentimes worse adversity and come out the other end, and was able to give these young men an education and awareness as to where their behaviors may take them and that they don't need to go down my path because they were kind of at the fork in the road of, hey, I can learn some tools and work with this guy and go on to live a quote unquote normal young adulthood, or I can kind of pave my own way and not listen to anyone and maybe end up needing to go to treatment or needing to get sober or having the stigma XYZ. And we were able to do really great work with the young person, myself and that young person. We were able to really support mom and dad in holding certain boundaries. And then we had a clinical arm, Dr. K, who went on to help me found YPM, helping from the clinical oversight point of view. And so we had a couple of these cases where we're wildly successful in helping change, alter the course of these young people. And that's when the light bulb went off that we are operating in a preventative space, in a risk mitigative space, rather than waiting for these young people to hit the crisis, to get so far into the rabbit hole that it's okay, you need to get sober at 19, you need to go to treatment, you need to enter into what sometimes can be the revolving door of behavioral healthcare centers. And though these centers are very much needed and serve a great purpose, but sometimes if we can get to them before that need, that should be the goal. And so we had this light bulb moment, and that was the foundation of YPM, which was really meant to be an addiction mitigation service that we then founded in 2019. Come 2020, we all know COVID hits, and we all know what that did to the mental health crisis in this country, especially for the young people and the younger demographic. So, what had initially started as an addiction mitigation program, we saw all of these young adults and teenagers going through COVID, coming out of COVID with a lot of mental health, with a lot of behavioral health problems, social rustiness, executive dysfunction, and not really knowing where to go or what to do. So we pivoted our approach from addiction mitigation to really, focusing on these behavioral traits, and they all kind of fall under one umbrella at the end of the day. But a lot of our work now is focused around that behavioral health, mental health, and yes, there's certainly substance abuse sprinkled within, and that is what YPM really tries to focus on. And I know that was a mouthful and a long story, but what we do is we create teams around the young adult, the family, in a very curated and tailored fashion to meet their needs and meet them where they're at. So I'm going to pause there. Jack, I'm going to let you hop in so I can catch my breath, because there's a lot more to what we do in terms of our tiered approach, the mentor match, etc. But I want to let Jack hop in.
Yeah, great. Thanks again, B. It's so great to be here and really appreciate the opportunity to speak more to YPM and what we do. A little background on myself as well. I've been in the mental health field for a few years now, and I was working with different mentoring coaching companies when I first started out. But even rewinding the clock back further than that, my struggles began with my mental health in my teens. 15, diagnosed with ADHD, very kind of typical person struggling with ADHD, always forgetting to hand in homework, always, being really impulsive, having no sense of time management at all, and just really kind of bumbling my way through high school and most of college. Just couldn't quite get out of my own way. And I also have bipolar, so it was a mood dysregulation, was often increasing those kind of ADHD symptoms, and it was really a challenge for me to kind of get myself in order and learn skills and techniques that could help me be stable and actually thrive in my own life. And so once I kind of figured out more or less what that was and how it was working for me, I was able to work and with different organizations and basically impart those skills. But my chimes really went off when I started working with YPM and the ethos and the philosophy and how Max operates and our team operates with, our director of family programming, Dr. Louise Stanger, our clinical arm with Dr. Rami Kaminsky, in the way that we were curating packages and helping young men, young women in a really bespoke fashion. And sometimes, it is really more on the addiction end of the spectrum. Other times it's more on the mental health, behavioral health end. And so I was able to plug in with them and started working with them and just loved it, from day one. So yeah, I mean, that's how we started working together and it's been phenomenal. But so, yeah, flash forward and now here our director of US operations and have designed some of our programming as well. And to get into a little bit more of that, so speaking more to what Max was talking about, really what we focus on is treatment without walls care. We're trying to meet people in their living environment. Sometimes that's while they're living at home with mom and dad. Sometimes that's while they're still in college and they're living on campus. Other times that's after college and now they're a young adult, maybe living alone for the first time and things aren't going so well. So we're joining up and curating our programming to meet people no matter where their living environment is and provide them the absolute best live-in support we can. And so, wraparound services for the whole family. Mom and dad get to work with Dr. Louise Stanger. We have clinical oversight through Dr. Rami Kaminsky, who's board certified. He's the former chief psychiatrist of the state of New York for, I believe, 15 years. And I think, that is a really special thing, but really our secret sauce is the mentor match process, which I love being a part of and helping find, that perfect match along with Max is, who is going to be the absolute best fit for this young person. And we don't prioritize like geography over fit. We prioritize fit over geography. We've had cases where we've had a coach literally fly in from overseas because we knew that she would be the absolute best fit for that person that she was going to work with. And so we will go to great lengths to make sure that that's, going to be there from day one. And there's going to be a real connection between the mentor and the mentee. But yeah, it's also very beneficial that we have a deep bench, large roster, and we get to be flexible that way. So
Hey,
yeah,
what age, what's the youngest you serve, I guess is the easiest way to ask.
13 is the youngest we've served, and we always say 13 to 30. Okay. That being said, we've worked with a 35-year-old that acted more like the 18-year-old than the 18-year-old did. So it really depends on presenting conditions and just the scenario.
I think in order to understand what you do, because I kind of know what y'all do, and Max, you and I have been on a call together. I think I've seen you speak on a panel, and Jack and I had dinner less than 2 weeks ago, and we hear about you all the time with, our mutual people we collaborate with. And y'all have an amazing reputation. We love what y'all do. And, but to understand it, I was just kind of thinking about myself, as I always do, because I'm a selfish, self-centered alcoholic. But I was thinking about, in terms of, let's say when I was 14 years old, I went to boarding school and, went to a highly rigorously academic boarding school and didn't do very well my first semester, failed a French class. Next thing I know, I'm in front of psychiatrists and prescribed Ritalin and have ADD. I don't even think ADHD was really thrown around too much then. But I was at that crossroads where I just started experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And I was probably, because I don't, as far as I know, I don't have the genetics for it. It was really self-made. So what would you do with a person like that?
That's great. And this is, I think, where we thrive. And I'll just make an assumption for the case study. I don't know if this is true, but let's also say that you were resistant to some sort of treatment, that you didn't want to speak with these therapists or talk with these people or do an IOP or, go help yourself. You're a 14-year-old kid, you want to hang out with your friends. So this is something where over, I would say the last 18 months, I've really grown, and Jack's certainly a part of this, to pride ourselves in fostering buy-in from young people, and working with the quote unquote treatment resistant. At first, I thought it was, maybe just a fluke the first 15, 20 times. And then I started to realize, no, what we offer is very enticing. And the way that we offer it is very enticing to these young people. So what we'll always say to potential parents is, let's just say your parents called us and say, hey, my son B's struggling. I read about YPM. It sounds like a great service. How do we move forward? Before, even if they're like, let's do this, let's start tomorrow, before any of that, we'll always say, well, we need to speak with your son. Because we want to come in with the understanding between us and the young person that we're their advocate, we're working with them, we're not working against them, we're not a hired gun and a drill sergeant to make them do X, Y, and Z. So we'll explain very briefly about who we are, what we do. Usually, if it comes down to substance use, etc., my story is a lot more gnarlier than the average 14-year-old, so I can shed a little light on that, and then they realize they're not talking to their school counselor who's going to get them in trouble, and then I can say, hey, I like to work with other young guys to help them get to where they want to be, and are there areas in your life that you think you could stand to be supported in? And the answer is always yes. The answer is yes for every single person in the world. And just by breaking down those barriers of, hey, I want to get you where you want to be, not where mom and dad wants to be, allows us to get in there. And then it's kind of off to the races, because once we're able to get them with a mentor who shares similar interests and has been through similar experiences, they realize that they're a part of the solution and that they're not the problem. So once, let's just say the 14-year-old, we would come in and we always start with a strength-based approach. So what is it that drives you? What are you passionate about? Is it sports? Is it what hobbies? Is it writing? Is it reading? Is it video games? And we start to build programming and build areas to promote your self-efficacy, your resilience, certain tools around your strengths, because then you can start to move laterally and say, okay, I'm exceeding in X, Y, and Z because I'm good at it and I enjoy it, but the same tools that I'm using to exceed in X, Y, and Z can be utilized in these other areas that I don't really like, but that I kind of need to work on. So it's really all about the buy-in, and once you have the buy-in, which is very difficult to get, especially at this age group, the sky is really the limit.
Cool. And then will you talk a little bit more about the actual matching, the mentor matching?
Sure, Jack, you want to take that one?
Yeah, definitely. So, let's just take you for example again, right? We would go down our roster and we'd think about, based on the information we have from your parents and maybe any other clinicians who are already in the picture, what are your interests? What's your background? And we're going to look for someone who has a very similar background, but who also has overcome that adversity and is, in a better place now. So it's really about finding, and sometimes it looks great on paper, sometimes it seems like we have the great fit and we're willing to make adjustments in real time. Like we had a case in New York not long ago, and it seemed like there was a good person. Like if we just went down the list of, everything on paper, but then there was this, the young IP, he was really into music. And so we had a mentor who was, in a band, and he still performs in New York and stuff. And so we actually attached that mentor, then things really ratcheted up. I mean, the bond was very tight. And again, with cultivating the buy-in, it's sometimes, it's very important to get that deeper kind of overlap between people, but sometimes those super like official interests, things like music, movies, the arts, just even matching on that level is sometimes equally as important.
And so you're saying that it was a good match or was not?
No, it was.
Okay.
It was fantastic. I mean, initially we had, someone close by who was, you know, I think for maybe a week they were working and they were making progress, but when it became more clear just how like into music the IP was, we then actually put in a different mentor who had much stronger musical background as opposed to maybe the experience. I believe it was, for that match, it was drinking, right? I mean, on paper, he was a great guy, sober, and, you know, uh, they were a good fit, but there wasn't that music piece. And so once that really came to the forefront, and the parents were kind of like, we don't really want him to go in that direction, but it was so important to that young person. And so when we paired him with a person with musical background and shared interests and tastes like that, then they were really off to the races. So it's, we're looking for overlap in terms of adversity, but we're also looking for overlap in terms of interests, hobbies, things like that.
Absolutely. It just reminded me of kind of, when in my recovery world, when I sometimes especially when I was new, somebody would come into the meetings I was going to and would basically look like somebody I would be friends with and maybe even say a few things. But then it turns out that I don't relate to that person at all, and that I find more commonality in the most unlikely places. But I totally get that. I
Yeah.
just misunderstood you, so I'm glad I cleared that up. But what are y'all seeing? Like, you started right before COVID, and it sounds like you sort of started with this was going to be mostly drugs and alcohol, and then knowing there'd be some mental health, but then it's sort of reversed. I mean, what trends are you seeing beyond that kind of flip in terms of actual substances, actual diagnoses, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing a lot of, and we're actually in the midst of creating a program around this. Uh, Many people call it failure to launch, but I really think it's a lot deeper than that. We're seeing a real lack of social survival skills. I can't tell you how many calls each week we get from concerned parents of a 17 to 24-year-old who either graduated school, dropped out of school, and can't find themselves getting a job, doesn't like to leave their room, up weird hours of the night. Yes, there's marijuana sprinkled in there, maybe some drinking, but it's really a paralysis and a lacking of that term self-efficacy we talked about to coordinate their skills and their tools that they likely have to achieve their desired outcomes. All of the tools are there. They just don't know how to funnel it and to channel it. And their interaction with the outside world has just dwindled and dwindled over the years. And that is one of the reasons, and this will segue nicely, that Jack, saw this and saw his own experience and thought, we need to come up with an executive functioning branch, which Jack, started about a year, 18 months ago, and that's really taken off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's hear more about that, Jack.
Yeah. So EF12 is our executive functioning coaching program, and it's really designed to work with any young person, whether they're struggling with addictive tendencies, if they're just struggling with executive dysfunction, um, personality disorder, mood disorder, whatever the dysregulation is. If you really had to boil down executive dysfunction to one particular issue, it's a failure to self-regulate, and it's being able to work on skills that help people build up those self-regulation skills is it's so fundamental no matter where you are in the spectrum of mental behavioral health issues. And so, yeah, just based on my own experience and kind of taking that long, hard look in the mirror and reflecting and studying and just really doing everything I could to try to figure out how I was ticking and how I was getting in my own way, I was able to kind of synthesize this in particular with the clients I was working with and the young men I was helping. And so once I started to see how it was working with someone over here, and then I was applying it to this client, and I was seeing these great improvements, that's when I realized, okay, there's really something to this. There's something here, and we should really focus on this. And so what EF12 is in a nutshell is there's 12 core executive functioning skills, and we basically have a way of locating a person in relation to those skills, right? Some people need more help with impulse control. Other people need more help with task initiation. Other people need more help with emotion regulation. And it kind of depends, right? So we're going to look at a person and see where they stand in regards to all that, and then start to really, through motivational interviewing and other behavioral health techniques, start to impart those skills. It's kind of similar to with recovery coaching when you're using MI and you're using that as a therapeutic, you could say, medium to help relate, basically strategies, tools, techniques for long-term sobriety. I'm trying to do that, and we're trying to do that with the executive functioning skills.
Interesting. So when you got these people, you said you in one case somebody, or maybe multiple cases, somebody came from overseas because that was going to be a good mentor match. How do you find these people, just in general, who work for you, who are the mentors?
It's varied. I would say a lot of them you just meet throughout the industry and throughout our partners, and in certain, I would say, networking situations. We do have a very kind of robust vetting process that we do internally when we're onboarding someone. And a lot of, by the grace of God, a lot of mentors have been coming to us, I would say, the last 18 months and saying, hey, I heard of what you do, or they met Jack somewhere and they want to interview. And that's been great because once all of the accreditations and certifications are taken care of, which are helpful, but that's not necessarily what I always look for. I always like to meet new, hungry mentors and coaches that are young and who have been through it and are passionate about the work we do, because that's essentially what Jack and I were 6-7 years ago. And yeah, like I said, the accreditations are great, certifications, further education. I did all of those things, and you learn a lot. But what I personally look for when I'm interviewing and vetting is their personal story of resilience, and not only what they went through, because as you know, B, a lot of people have been through a lot of shit and get sober, and that doesn't mean that they're the best candidate to help someone else. So it's about what they've been through and how they continue to implement what helped them get through their adversity in their day-to-day affairs. It's a daily reprieve, and if they're going to be helping and working with someone, I like to see what it is they do in their personal life, because we're very much, practice what you preach.
Yeah. And I find in this field too, in the field and the recovery space where they merge, and how they're in my, and I keep them separate, but I like, hope that they can complement each other. But there are people I know who, went through a lot of shit and got clean, got sober, and maybe it wasn't even necessarily a sobriety thing, but overcome major adversity and they are on the other side of it. But sometimes they just feel better off going about their business and being a good example. And then there are people like us who feel called to do this kind of work. When I first started doing it, I would get a little paranoid about it. Like, wait a minute, so this is a job and I'm getting paid, and this is supposed to be this altruistic thing. And whenever I had that doubt, I would just think, you know what, somebody's going to do this kind of work, and it may as well be people who are doing it for the right reason. So I hope y'all feel that way too.
100%. And I certainly had those qualms in the beginning, but was quick to learn and understand that they are very bifurcated, and in every recovery realm, whether that be mental health or substance use. And I would say kind of different rules apply. I mean, a mentor or coach is not a sponsor, and they do very different things. And I didn't know that at first, and I was quick to realize that. And they actually work very well together, to work along, say, hey, this is something for your sponsor. This is not something that we're going to talk about. Or, hey, I'm going to check in on you as your mentor when in sponsorship terms, the sponsor doesn't usually, I don't call my sponsees. I let them call me. But if I have a mentee who, I'm slightly concerned about, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to make sure they're accountable.
Yeah, and thank you so much for clearing that up too, because I know we've had lots of coaches and people who have worked with us, and some have been on here, and there is that confusion, about what those roles exact roles are, and where does one end and where does one begin. And the best advice I got when I started working in this field was to not let this be my program. And back to what I said a second ago, and what you're saying too, is bifurcated, and I do keep them separate. I used to always say, I treat my job in treatment like I work at Sears. I don't even know if Sears exists anymore, but I think people get the idea. But but that doesn't mean that I can't practice the principles in all my affairs, including work, especially work, and then also, the reverse of that, hopefully. So you're both of you are kind of on the road a lot. What does a typical day for you look like, Max?
I wish I could say there was a typical day.
As soon as I asked that, I was like, that is a terrible question for Max. I know he's all over the place.
No, it's good. It keeps me on my toes. So a lot of my time and now Jack's time, which is great as he's segueing more into case management, is supporting, of course, fielding new inquiries and helping, grow the business in that sense, but really supporting and being available to the clients we have now. I mean, the service we offer and the reason why we're so effective is because we're available around the clock, 24 hours a day. So holding space for not only the families, but really also for the mentors, for the coaches, because they need support just as much as the families and the young adult, because their work is so emotionally draining at times. And I've been there. The first 3+ years in this field, I was the one boots on the ground, so I really know what it's like to feel supported and to not feel supported in this work. So Jack and I always make a point to make sure that our mentors feel supported, whether that be daily phone calls, daily check-ins, taking things over and kind of being the heavy in certain situations, being the bad guy so that the pressure can come off of them. And that comes in a variety of ways. But long story short, our days are usually split up between emails, Zooms, and phone calls.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And back to, that example, and you sort of just touched on it, but back to the 14-year-old me example, let's say that I meet with one of you and I'm like, hey, this guy's not some old man wagging a finger at me. I can relate to this guy. Okay, I'm in. And then what about my, the parents and the like my little brother? Do y'all work with everybody involved?
Yes, we do. So that is where the lovely Dr. Louise comes into the equation, and she will work with mom and dad, or the parents. Sometimes little bro, little sis, older brother, older sister will come into the equation, but only if they're like a major stakeholder or need to be brought in. And the beauty of this is that mom and dad get to be held accountable, or the parents get to be held accountable. And it takes all the pressure of young person, you're the problem, fingers pointed at you, to, hey, this is a family situation. We're trying to grow through this as a family unit. And not only do you have your advocate, and let's just say Jack, who's your mentor, who's your peer and really on your side, we have our advocate and mentor, Dr. Louise, and she's going to hold us accountable. And that leads to a lot of what we call change agreements or behavioral contracts, where we get all the information from both sides, parents and young person, as to what they want out of this situation, so that there's no gray area, so that everyone feels heard. And then everyone also feels like, because the overarching idea is to work ourselves out of a position. We want to be a blip in their history as a family, but we put in these we put in these contracts so that they can always refer to them, and everyone can feel like when we're not even there, okay, we've worked on this with these people, and we know that this is an idea or something that rubs mom the wrong way that she really doesn't want me to do, and we've spoken about it, and in return they're not doing XYZ. So it creates this mutual understanding within the family unit that allows them to find formation. And Dr. Louise is unbelievable at working with them, and the type of demographic and family that we often work with sometimes don't like being told that they're wrong or that they're parenting the wrong way, and she has a very delicate but firm way of approaching them.
Love it. Something that comes up in my personal life through this kind of work, and sometimes it comes up on this podcast too, is just the families who often, in my experience, whenever any kind of suggestion is made for them to do some work on themselves, the reaction, whether it's vicious or not, is, well, wait a minute, he's the alcoholic, he's the sick, he needs help. Why am I being punished? And it's always interesting to try to help them understand that this is, a family thing, first of all, family disease, especially with substance. But that this is an opportunity for people to find peace and joy and be happy, joyous, and free and serene without having to, in a lot of cases, go through the depths of despair and hell that a lot of the addict or alcoholic or the person who is the client went through or is going through.
100, yeah, 100%. And I'll let Jack answer, but I will say that's another reason why the work we do is so focused on in the home, because we've seen amazing work take place at an inpatient facility, and then when the young person comes back, guess what? Mom and dad didn't do any work, and then they're back in that family environment, and the dynamic hasn't changed, and within X amount of time they're back to doing what they're doing. So even if it's not mom, parents, you're doing something wrong, but hey, you did the best with the resources you had, and your the saying, your best thinking got you here, as did your child's. So, why don't we look to shift some things? And it's not pointing the finger. It's like, hey, nothing changes till nothing changes. Sorry, Jack, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And just talking more about really the in-home environment that we're curating, these young kids are so impressionable. I mean, this is our most impressionable time in life, is when we're this age. And so we're trying to instill not just a mentor, but someone who's really role modeling healthy habits, wellness, and just other great qualities in real time. And there's something of like an osmosis process that happens that's really awesome, because we're spending large quantities of time with these young people, and they start to absorb that. I mean, whether we're being direct or whether we're being just in their life, and we're going to the gym with them and we're helping them carve out time for homework, we're helping them get to an AA meeting, we're helping them go to softball, we're helping them pursue vocational aspirations. We're with them riding shotgun through their experience in life, helping guide them to where they want to go. But it starts to recalibrate that home environment, that oftentimes if they are coming back home and nothing has changed, it's just waiting to devolve. I mean, you have likely a problematic friend group that maybe wasn't the best influence. Mom and dad might not have done the work they needed to do. And so if we can work to get people on the same page and align, and start to get them more connected to themselves and reconnected to their family, then we're doing really great work. And we're also trying to work on that milieu as well, right? It's like we're trying to introduce them to more positive influences outside of just the mentorship, so that they start to feel like that home environment is actually a place where they can thrive. And that's where the self-efficacy gets involved, because when they start seeing things moving in a better direction, they start feeling more confident at home. That's when they're off the couch, and they don't need to be isolating, and they feel less of a desire to self-medicate, and they start to feel like they're taking charge of their own life.
Love it. How long? I'm so bad about abruptly ending. We can totally cut and stuff, so don't worry. Is there anything else y'all wanted to definitely talk about?
No, no. I mean, we're easy.
Yeah.
If there's something you want to go down, we can cover. But I think this has been amazing.
No, it's been great. I again, I have this bad habit of never knowing how long we've gone and looking at Solomon and asking him how long it's been. But I'm gonna count down to from 3, 2, 1, and then I'm gonna ask you like how do we find you and let y'all kind of take us out. Is that cool?
Right. Great.
3, 2. All right. How do we find you?
So you can find us online at youthpreventionmentors.com. You can find us on Instagram at Youth Prevention Mentors, LinkedIn, and one of our emails will be there. We answer our own phones, we answer our own emails, so you'll get a call back very shortly.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much, Max and Jack. It's been a pleasure. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for all the
Likewise,
work.
thank you guys.